Karen's slides are a virtual slide deck, and you'll get to know what she means when you get to see her speech. A lot of you know Karen, and if you don't, she's an award-winning playwright, director, and performer, two-time finalist for the Governor General's Award. She's Chicago-born, Toronto-raised, and now at home right here in Calgary. Would you please welcome Karen Hines? Come on up, Karen.
Some of you won't be able to see me, but that's okay, because there are slides. Good afternoon. I am a theater artist, and I am a new Calgarian. I was born in Chicago, grew up in Toronto, and moved to New York as a young performer. I've worked in many cities in North America and abroad, and after testing their waters, I'm honored to be here this afternoon to speak about how I was drawn west and why I chose to stay, despite my Eastern hick notions of Calgary as a metropolis lousy with horses, dust, and bubbling crude seeping up through cracks in the wooden sidewalks. Forgive me, I am from Toronto. My first slide depicts my childhood perception of a Calgarian, a cowboy on a bucking bronco in a wild frontier town. Actually, the first slide is gone now, and there is a second. Don't worry that you can't see it, it's invisible. It's a grainy black and white photograph of the human soul, the collective human soul. You'll have to trust me, that's where I'm going, but in the meantime, so that you know, all of my slides today will be virtual, so I hope you can lend me your imaginations for the next 5 minutes and 42 seconds. Slide 3 is the number 13, upside down. Last Friday, February 13th, was the day Maggie, Jay, and I were supposed to deliver our slides for this presentation. But my boyfriend of 17 years, Blake Brooker, was Michael Green's partner at One Yellow Rabbit Performance Theatre for 35 years. That fact, compounded with the loss of their composer and dear friend Richard McDowell 3 months earlier, meant that our world was upside down on the 13th. And I don't know about you, but I find PowerPoint challenging at the best of times. It was a small consolation to be excused, to ditch technology for something that lives in the imagination, elastic and unbreakable. The upside-down 13 is glowing, ominous, like a spooky Halloween icon. Oh, but the slide has changed again. Speaking of Halloween, slide 4, Mump and Smoot, adult clowns of horror. Some of you may have seen their show or their posters around town during the High Performance Rodeo. I've been their director for 25 years. We grew up together as improvisers in Toronto, and as a company of avant-garde clowns, we've toured to New York, overseas, and around the continent, but found ourselves oddly invited to Calgary again and again. Speaking of control, I'm falling behind on the virtual slides. This is the virtual morph section, or how does a Torontonian become a Calgarian? Slide of me in 1984, goth chick at 19 with torn fishnets and black-rimmed abyss eyes on my way to live in New York. Slide of me in 1985 on a Hell's Kitchen stoop beside my roommate who was a heroin addict. Slide of me a year after that, crawling back from New York, homesick for friends and family, my country, my pajamas, wanting to make things as opposed to just struggle to make them. Next slides, the horror clowns again in a reclaimed Canada Post van, touring across the country. Now, me on stage at the High Performance Rodeo in my own dark solo, Citizen Poxy, and loving the opportunity to call us all rodeo clowns. Next slide is a close-up of a beautiful blue eye, Blake Brooker's eye, one of the 2 blue eyes through which I learned about the city I had really only ever toured through. I knew I loved the audiences, and Blake identified why. Frontier spirit, a willingness to embrace the wild. I found this place exotic, and I still do. I fell in love with its spirit of hospitality, the stylishness. It seemed to me everybody was riding bucking broncos, but in more metaphorical ways. Cut to 2009, and I'm in Ramsey, walking our fuzzy labradoodle with the Saddle Dome below us and the mountains in behind, drinking coffee in my pajamas and a really expensive parka, just like a real Calgarian. Next, a backyard dinner party in Toronto. Rob Ford was still in office, and I was introduced as Karen from Calgary, which surprised some of the guests. This was a table of television professionals, and some of us knew each other from a TV show we had worked on, The Newsroom, the Canadian one. "Why did you move to Calgary?" they asked, but not before one of the guests said, "You must be going crazy out there." And another said bitterly, "Calgary, looks like you got our mayor and we got yours." There is still amazingly a notion in certain pockets of certain cities that there is a uniform conservative political will here and that Mayor Nenchi's election to office was an accident. Next slide is one of boiling blood, mine. Next is one of our host's cat creeping away from the dinner table as I seethed. Next slide, a family of raccoons by the garbage bin freezing in their tracks as I icily explained to the table that my new Western friends include a developer who is also a waterkeeper, a French teacher who has introduced yoga into the official Alberta education curriculum, a Blackfoot actor who made me give him the elk antler I found, which I did with pride, a poet who skis really well. Next slide is an ultrasound of the brains of all those Toronto dinner guests, expanding as I introduce the idea of frontier spirit as a contemporary concept, as I describe the sense of community and possibility that attends the entire setup here, the cross-pollination, the spirit of collaboration combined with fearless invention that is unlike anything in any other city I have lived or worked in, and the fact that though I still love Toronto, more things happen when I'm west. Next slide is a map, a satellite map of a rugged domain, freedom and beauty, which maps my lucky a satellite map of a rugged domain, freedom and beauty, which maps my lucky proximity to the yellow rabbits, and which reminds me every day of what is possible here, they being so close to the soul of the city and also so much a part of the world. Now a Google map of all the cities and countries I have traveled to from here since I became a Calgarian 6 years ago, 6 years that have been more productive and varied than the previous 15. Now screenshots of my very first magazine articles for Swerve, stills from my very first short films, a photo of a real actual skeleton of a cow that hung over the stage at ATP for my play called Drama, which was in the Enbridge Playwrights Festival, despite the fact that it is a satire of the city, which describes, lovingly, mad oil wives, zombies at the Hotel Arts, and the ghosts of mournful cattle. These projects were made in collaboration with Calgarians who barely knew me and just said, heck, yes, in flying leaps of faith, my bold new bosses, embodiments of hospitality and frontier spirit. Slide 18 of 20, the Toronto dinner guests' mouths opening and closing like Bow River trout. And I say that tenderly because I love Bow River trout. But their mouths were opening and closing as they grappled with the confounding possibility that I gained more than I lost when I stepped away from my Toronto TV career. Slide 19 of 20, an array of actual Bow River amphibians endangered but indirectly protected by my developer friend. This slide marks the dinner party conversation's shift from television production to the protection of river creatures as my boiling blood returned to Bow River cool. Last slide. The number 13, again, right side up now, luminous, spooky, part mayhem, part talisman, part call to beware, part call to arms, part call to laughter. For horror clowns, the number 13 is lucky. It bodes well. It is random and so riddled with the same spirits as any other number, but most comical because in fearing it, we think we are in control. Embrace all aspects of living is Mump and Smoot's mantra. To boldly go where no clown has gone before is our shared mandate. My collaborators and I were drawn inexorably to this community 25 years ago. Wild theater was our common passion, a thread that drew us together and which persists. A thread that pulled me to this place, into this community of artists, amphibians, rabbits, and citizens who seem to be afraid of nothing. Frontier spirit, howdy.